as long as you're functional and you're contributing to that system, you're valued. And that system, the best it can do is an "Are you okay" day.
It is the loneliness, it is the isolation that is making people more likely to get sick, stay sick, and to pass away.
They hate "Are you okay" day. Because someone says, "Are you okay?" They're like, "No, actually I want to kill myself." And then like people walk away from them because they don't know how to answer. So it's better not to ask unless you
Welcome back, viewers. Admire the Art of Business. Your host admires here. We are back on the next session, and it's great to say hello. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice
It's
to be
lovely
here.
for you to come, and it's great for you to spend time with us. You know, that's giving back to the community, and we love that.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for inviting me along.
Yeah, beautiful. And so today we will be discussing about the mental well-being for immigrants. And we, on the first part, or I would say on the other part, we discussed quite a lot. And I love the fact that we ended up having a free-flowing conversation. I love that part, you know? Things will just happen. We're no longer looking at, okay, what's question here and everything else. But let's get to it right now. And I will start maybe with Hala, right? Is that
You're on
okay?
the spot, yeah.
Come on, all right.
All good.
Oh, you still wanted to warm up, eh?
Throw the newbie in the deep end.
Oh,
I'm
no
good.
way.
Let's see. I'll tell you.
All right. Tell me, do you find that social, support networks play a significant role in mitigating the, psychological challenges faced by, immigrants? And from your own experience, do you want to maybe elaborate with practical examples, the kind of networks that you've seen helping people? Yeah.
Like, firstly, yes, 100%. Largely, I really think it's an absolute fact that we're not islands. Humans need to be in relationship with other humans, and probably I would say nature and animals too. But we are mammals and we are relational beings, and so when we become isolated from social support systems, which would just be a community around you or people you can go to, or then that can be really damaging. And I think we see that in the more Western a society, the more individualistic it is, the more capitalist and commercialized it is. We see the disconnection in general, not just for migrant communities, but there's a general disconnection from that. And we see a rise in anxiety disorders and in depression disorders and in isolation and loneliness. And this is something we talk about a lot, but we don't actually do anything about it because that might not make money in the current system. But so then when you migrate to Australia, and especially if you come from a collectivist culture, which I think most of us do, and you're used to, like everyone in their building talks to each other, like all the neighbors know each other, your relatives are everywhere, you just walk down the street, you see them, like you're in constant relationship with people. Suddenly you come here and one, you don't know as many people if you're new. You don't know the language necessarily, or it's not your preferred language, even if you speak English really well. So expressing yourself, like when we're talking about mental health, actually wanting to express yourself is going to be very different in a language you're not comfortable with. So if you don't have someone to speak to that gets your culture, gets where you've come from, gets your language, you can just express yourself how you want, that can be extremely isolating and tough. And then I think in addition to that, you might try to access support and be, I guess find yourself being asked questions like about who you are, and when you end up having to explain yourself to someone who doesn't understand your culture, as opposed to just talking about what's wrong. And then the whole time is gone on that. And it, I think, adds another layer, becomes a layer to your issue. Like, that's a very isolating experience in itself. To just walk into a health service or a care space and not be understood or not be seen, not be heard at that real level. So I think 100% social support systems are important, but it's also what they are and who they are.
It's quite interesting that you bringing out, the individualism and the collective society, because it's evident that when you mention it, and do you want to summarize what you spoke about earlier in terms of that space?
Well, I guess the key point was that isolation kills us.
Yeah.
And that
Yes.
it perpetuates and creates and exacerbates every health condition that ever existed.
Absolutely.
And it's really interesting, even from a Western perspective, that perhaps, there's this idea that individualism is valued. However, what our service has recently been doing since the end of last year was going to aged care facilities and providing clinical psychology or counseling or social work there. It's very interesting how it comes full circle, because at the end of the day, it is being recognized that it is the loneliness, it is the isolation that is making people more likely to get sick, stay sick, and to pass away. Because people aren't necessarily as connected to family, friends, whatnot. People have passed away in their lives, children are busy, and so they know we're coming every week. I'll see you next week, and people are just elated. So it's interesting that, exactly like Hala said, at the end of the day, we are social animals. We are pack animals. And at the end of the day, we just want to know that we belong. And those elderly people, 85, 90, 95, from Western backgrounds, look forward to seeing us every week when we show up to have a chat.
Yeah, I think there's also, like from scientific perspective too, if you, like we do a lot of work at the Institute with polyvagal theory and the limbic system and regulating, like self-regulation and co-regulation. And there's a lot of focus in the West on self-regulation, and it's an amazing skill to have if you can if your system is triggered into a fight, flight or freeze response, that you are actually able to self-regulate. But there's also so much evidence that co-regulating with others is way more effective and really powerful. So if you see a community that goes through trauma together, like whether it's a climate crisis or a war zone or something like that, migration is traumatic in itself. So people who migrate here and connect straight away with people from the same background who migrated at the same time, because there's a difference there too, actually co-regulate together because they've got someone. So you like I mirror a few right now. Like if I become heightened, you might calm down, and then I look at you and I calm down. Whereas if I'm by myself and I don't know who to talk to, there's only so much self-regulation can work. Eventually it'll reach its limits, and I'll be calling somebody saying I need anti-anxiety medication, or like sort of summarizing briefly.
Yeah, absolutely. Dee, how does the fear of discrimination or xenophobia in a new country influence the mental health of immigrants? And what strategies can be effective in addressing this kind of fears?
Yeah, fear of discrimination. Yeah, that's a big thing as well, because as you're coming here, many people do not know the expectations. They don't know, they just know themselves. So I know who I am, I know what I can do, I know what I'm good at. And then you get to maybe a workplace or area that you're living in, and people are looking at you like, who are you? What are you all about? Like even say someone will ask you, where do you come from? How is that important? They might want to know, definitely. Genuinely. But then people end up not knowing, because some of those questions have been connected to other traumas. So people then become resistive, defensive. And then the way they see things now is no longer just that genuine question. They relate it to racism, they relate it to whatever is happening, which most times it can be true, according to how they are perceiving things. So then it means as we are getting into that space, we no longer have safe people. If you are in a workplace and you are that defensive, how good am I going to perform? So then it becomes a ripple effect. When I go home, I'm going to tell my kids, don't be discriminated. And yet maybe nothing like that was happening to them. But also, instead of it coming as a psychoeducation to say there's such a thing, be aware of it, and you put yourself in this place. It's like I'm defensive. And the whole line.
It's there. It's like ask you, where are you from?
Yeah.
Where? Where are you from?
Yeah, there was a time I would respond nicely.
Yeah.
But then after a bad experience, I would then respond differently.
Yeah.
Why do you want to know that?
Yeah.
What difference is it going to make here in what I'm doing?
Yeah.
And then it can even go higher to say someone will say, I don't want to be attended by this person because they are not like this.
Yeah.
And then that is not helping my psychology. It's not even helping me, because as I'm going, I'm starting to self-doubt. I'm starting to question a lot of things about this system that was supposed to be good. And that could be one person
Yeah, absolutely.
who's causing that. And then 10 more people don't think like that. But then it becomes a stereotype.
Unfortunately, our brains, become hyper vigilant, and like from a neuroscience, I guess, evolutionary perspective, we have a negativity bias, and so we see the one bad thing that happened in order to survive. Right? That snake bit my comrade. I'm afraid of snakes. That's it, and it goes down the whole chain. Epigenetically, that now we're all, most people, if they see a snake, they're like, I don't get it. Right. And so, that intergenerational trauma then just passes on and on and on, and we become hypervigilant. We become scared.
Yeah. What kind of strategies that we can put in place, Karen, in terms of that space? We've got that system. We've got trauma that is keep going generation to generation. Are there any strategies that you would probably recommend in there?
Well, I don't know about strategies, but I know that in my practice, I like to use a modality called internal family systems, which looks at the parts. And sometimes there are inherited parts that have come down. We can work with those parts to see what their concerns are, because they're kind of like protecting something that's vulnerable or wounded, or wounds of shame or loneliness or worthlessness. A lot of it comes back to shame. Shame and lonely kind of go hand in hand. So there are lots of modalities that can help kind of go back to see where that came from, and start to shift how that perception of yourself and the parts that are doing these things, so that you can then come into a space where you have more self-compassion, where you have a stronger sense of your own self, and then work on that. I think also, yes, I think that would be my particular approach. I think there would be lots of other different types of approaches that could work on strengthening and releasing trauma that might be stored in the body, so that people start to feel safer. So I think it comes back to finding ways, whatever modality you use, to help people feel safer and connected, safer to be connected.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, I need to connect with myself, because now I'm holding a belief that, well, maybe I am worthless, maybe I am different, maybe I'm not enough, because this is what my experience has been. Oh, okay. So how strong is that belief? Where does it come from? What do you do in order to protect? What's the defense that you use? Well, I don't go to the shops, or I avoid this place, or I get really angry and I react, or I'm drinking. Whatever it is, it's then going, okay, so let's work on shifting that coping strategy. And I like parts work because it's non-pathologizing. We all have all these different parts. And then seeing if those parts will relax, so that the sense of self can be strengthened and come out. And then you're changing your own energy, and then you can decide how you might choose to respond to those kinds of situations. I think it's also helping people to see there's nothing, as I said earlier on, there's nothing wrong with you. It's coming from the outside.
I think that's I love that, and it's so aligned to a lot of the work I'm very passionate about, and we do in our team as well, around shame and trauma and the internal selves. And I was just thinking about the original question around being socially disconnected, and the moment where you said you learn to relate with the trauma, so you relate defensively with others. And I think when you're in community and you have like one traumatic interaction, but the rest, or the majority of the rest, are safe, you're less likely to develop a traumatic way of relating, or a traumatized way of relating, or a defensive way of relating because you've got lots of real life examples like that are alive right now of safety. There are occasions where people are unsafe in their whole community, but if you're isolated in your community and you have a traumatic relationship, then you start you start relating defensively everywhere, because you don't have any safe
system.
If I can go to 20 people and relate safely, then that becomes my traumatic relationship here, but not everywhere. But if if the majority of what I'm experiencing is a traumatic relationship, maybe because I'm alone, or I'm the only one who looks a certain way or acts a certain way or whatever. This can happen. Like I know we're sort of referring to I'm referring to ethnicity or race or culture at the moment, but like you could be just out of prison, you could be just out of mental health care. You could be just out of palliative care, or well, probably not palliative care, but like that would be very cool. You could be out of palliative care. You could be a new mom or a new dad or something like it, and it's an isolated experience for you in your community, and then you don't have anyone to safely relate with. That's going to have an impact on you.
And I'm thinking, like you said, what things, how we were talking earlier about asking people to do things. I think this is where now the going back to the employers and all these corporates to say, okay, hello, let's talk about this in the workplace. Can it be a conversation on orientation? Can it be talked about openly so that these things, because many times we just hide. You don't act as if it's there. We are treating everyone the same. And yet there are so many groups of people who are feeling discriminated. So let's bring it as a topic.
Equally in the workplace. I mean, most workplaces will have, yes, the EAP program. They will have, anti-discrimination training or, noticing policies. And you get the email saying you must do the mandatory training and you're X amount of days late for doing the mandatory training. And you do the training, but often, like in a clinical setting, you will hear people who will say things that it seems as though the organization in which they are working with doesn't actually uphold those values.
Right.
And so they are coming on, let's say, a workers' compensation claim, right? Because of psychological injury, bullying in the workplace, and the finger is pointed at the worker and saying, you have adjustment disorder. You just haven't figured out how to adapt to this culture. You are the problem. We're not the problem. Look at everybody else. They seem to be working just fine. You're sick. Go and get fixed.
And I think that's a symptom of since the Industrial Revolution and society becoming centering around economy and valuing economy above anything else, and becoming so capitalist, is we're just churning workers. Like you go to school, you go to high school, you go to university, you're learning to become a worker in this space. And then as a worker in a space, you're supposed to do ridiculous amounts of hours for crappy money until you become really high up in the chains. And if you do that, if you can get up the chains, and as long as you're functional and you're contributing to that system, you're valued. And the minute that system brings you down, which it will, it's not normal. It's not conducive to mental health at all. And lots of people suffer in that. As you said, you become pathologized for whatever reason. And that system, the best it can do at the moment is an "Are you okay" day. If we're talking about mental health specifically, and no consideration to whether you just asked a whole bunch of people to ask their colleagues if they're okay, but they're not equipped to take the answer if the person isn't okay.
That's another one.
The amount of people I know who live with suicidality, live with it. Like they've gotten used to it. They've got clinical depression. But they are suicidal almost all the time. They hate "Are you okay" day because someone says "Are you okay?" They're like, "No, actually, I want to kill myself," and then like people walk away from them because they don't know how to answer. So it's better not to ask unless you're equipped to respond. I know, like that's an extreme situation, but someone might say like, I don't know, I just lost someone really close to me, or there could be so much grief and bereavement and things that we're not equipped to respond to. And again, like this system isn't set up for us to be good at responding to that, because I need you to just, if it's a manager or a colleague, like you need to just get back to work. How are you going to be okay? So most of the time we're like, you should go see someone. Or, you should use try medication. EAP, or like go talk to your GP, mental health care plan. And like none of those systems are also like, so I'm suicidal and you're going to offer me 4 EAP sessions? And then what, with a person on the phone? And like, again, we come back to social systems. Rather than the person, like there's so much more training to do with workplaces, like the capacity to sit down and say, what's going on? Like, give me a little snippet of what's happening in your life. Can I help in any way? what do you need from me right now is a brilliant question. You don't have to have all the answers. You're not the expert. Don't try to save the person or solve their problems, but they will know what they need from you. They might say nothing, actually, thanks for asking me, and that's enough. Or I don't know, like, I want to talk to the manager, but I'm scared. Like, do you want me to come with you when you do that? Or who knows what they'll say, but it's just going a little step further than
Make it person safe.
Yeah.
It's rather interesting because, I teach mental health first aid, which is to help the average person to know what to say, what to do, how to move things forward. And I went to various different universities and I said, I know that you guys have your, employee support programs. I, teach mental health first aid, and there are many people who are accredited to teach it across Australia. It's not just me. They, we'll get back to you. Oh, we're not sure. Maybe not at this exact time.
The kind of, yeah.
But then you have Are You Okay Day, where those people don't have mental health first aid to be able to then
respond adequately.
respond.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
those organizations are saying, I don't know, not at this time. Maybe we'll think about it. Have you spoken to this person, this person, this person?
The
And
one
it
that-
disappears.
It's kind of like, I don't know, like really simply, if you're a kid and you're going to jump off a diving board for the first time in a swimming pool, only 1 meter high, nothing crazy, right? It's going to be scarier. And then when you do it and you realize you survive, it gets better. Then you start going. If you're an adventurous kid like I was, you want to jump off the 10-meter board eventually. But it's like, get everyone to just jump off even the side of the pool. Like, know that. I think we fear the unknown. So if I've never really sat down and had a conversation or been taught how to have a conversation, like to see what it's like to respond a little more adequately to someone who's struggling, then I'm so scared of it, I'd rather avoid it. I hear, like, throwing in racism again. People say that, like, when they haven't interacted with someone from a certain background, they'd rather not say anything in case they offend them than to say anything and help them feel welcome. So it's like taking that first step. Just dip your foot in the water, nothing happened. Okay, like, just immerse yourself slowly. Okay, now jump off the
Exposure
side. Then
therapy.
you can build. But take steps forward and know what you're safe. Like, know that you're.
You can always
Know what you can do when it feels like
Yes.
to do it. It'll get easier.
I think bringing up the issue of suicide is really critical and important because we know that with migrant, particularly African,
Yeah.
about the Zimbabwean community
Yes.
and how prevalent suicide is in these communities, and people are not well equipped, and it's easy. It's not difficult. But that's another thing we have to have conversations about. I have lived experience myself. I have had 2 sons that have attempted. I have struggled with suicidal thinking from time to time.
Do you like Are You Okay Day?
No.
You don't like it?
It's like
It's the yellow thing.
Yeah.
It's okay.
So, but then, and I sit with a lot of clients in that space, and it's just a little conversation that you can have, and if you know what to do, it's not difficult, it's not scary. So we need to start reducing stigma around suicide and use that word, and it shouldn't be a scary, bad word to use.
And really help people to learn how to respond. And
Yes.
and the workplace, which is where we spend the most of our time, for those people who work even 3, 4, 5 days a week, that's where you spend most of your life. Your life is spent at work.
And schools.
And schools as well. And it's really interesting how, like, limited kind of like capacity there actually is for a response in terms of suicide. And even thinking about a colleague of mine who really, from a migrant background, went to his supervisor and said, I just don't think I'm coping. Like, I'm suicidal. Even having this conversation, which was a difficult conversation, I'm suicidal. And her response was, well, you're here now, so let's finish the conversation.
Oh.
Oh,
How do you finish that?
that was a work interview or something.
This was a conversation about his workload, how much work he should be doing. And he's like, but as you can see, my workload is over 100%. I can't work 8-9 days in a week. I'm suicidal. I'm not coping. Well, you're here now, so let's finish the conversation. You're not dead, you're here. So, conversation to be completed now.
instead of thinking about saving people's lives.
And I'm sure she's just a cog in the machine, right? Because she has KPIs that she needs to meet. And it just means that she has to then lose her humanity to get the job done. To prioritize that economic or capitalistic goal at the expense of humanity.
Human life. And anyone can be suicidal at any time. You don't have to have mental health issues to be suicidal.
Absolutely. I do a lot of work in family violence, and one of the things I find, I'm going to bring this back to suicide, but one of the things I find is very confronting for people, particularly around individuals who use violence.
Oh, right.
Is it's scary. And we often use the words perpetrator and victim survivor, and we talk about them like they're people out there. And I often say to people, like, perpetrators and victim survivors is everyone in this room. We've all got the capacity to abuse power if we have it, and we've all got the possibility of being abused by power at some point in our lives. So there's a perpetrator and a victim in all of us. And there's a suicidal, possibility in all of us. There's an anxiety disorder in all of us. It may never surface. It may never be an issue for you. But if you don't sit comfortably with what's in you, you won't sit comfortably with it being in someone else. So if I'm not afraid of the idea that I might lose so much hope and be so disheartened by the world at some point, then I'll be confronted by someone else who feels that way. Whereas I kind of think the world can be extremely traumatic. I mean, look at it right now. If anyone is suicidal right now, I'm like, I get it.
I know.
It sucks. Let's bring it back to, you just left your family, you just left your home, you just left your environment that's so comfortable. You left everything you know, and you were somebody in that community, and you've just arrived here, and you're literally nobody. You're not a nobody. Your value is great, but you're not known to anyone. You don't have a story here. There's no longevity of you in the eyes of others. No. And that is really, again, isolating. And that can be really confronting. Then you've got to make money. So imagine that's the person having the conversation with that boss and saying it's an overload, right? Like, imagine just saying, tell me what's going on in your life. Wow, like, no wonder you feel that way. I think I'd feel the same if I was in your shoes. I mean, that's so validating for a person to go, I'm not crazy. Actually, it's really hard. What I'm going through is really hard. And I feel down. And it's like, okay, well, let's go get a coffee or something. Let's go for a walk. Tell me more about you. Tell me about something you love from back home. Or like, is there anything that you've loved about being here? Like, I don't know. Like, you can have any kind of conversation with someone. You can talk about their favorite animal. It doesn't have to be about what's going on in their life. But be with the person. Create a relationship.
Yeah. And you tell me, ladies, this effect, the psychological effect that we're talking about right now, I want to know the long-term effects. Say the next 10, 15, 20 years. What can we look at that and see what are the possibilities in there?
Yeah. I suppose these things happening, it's just like any other thing. Medically, if you've been told not to eat salt because your blood pressure will go up, and you continue to eat salt, what's going to happen? You're going to have high blood pressures, and then you're getting stroke. That's the end. So it's the same. It's just that it's happening in the brain, and people can't measure. I can't put a cuff to measure how your psychology is going, but everything can show. Talk about domestic violence. Some of the things that are happening in those homes are coming from those unattended issues from back then. So because it's becoming urgent now, because someone is punching somebody, or someone is killed somebody, or this thing is happening now, which is fatal. But if we had attended to that thing when it was just a small sign, to say, I'm not feeling well, I'm a bit dizzy, and then I go checked, do this, do that. So it means the effects become, look at your children. If you're a mom and you are living in that space where you've got these psychological problems, whatever they are, and then they are not attended, maybe 99.9% it's going to happen in the next generation.
That is correct.
Mhm.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
And then
Yeah.
the next generation.
And then the next.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a name, or they all do that. You know, I went to my first workplace in here. I was talking, this person who was supposed to be my manager in that shift, she was talking on top of her voice. I just in palpitations. I couldn't understand why she was talking like that, because I'm not coming from that space. I couldn't understand. And then in the middle of everything, she was very rude. And then when I was talking to my manager to say, when this happens, I don't feel comfortable. Oh, that's how she is. You know what I mean? Whether it could be that's how she is, but she hasn't been told or taught, you know, to have certain ways of thinking around others. Means that thing keeps on going. Imagine if I had learned from her and I also scream at my next team, and they scream at each other until forever.
Well, see, it'd be a problem if you did it, right?
Absolutely.
It'd be a problem when you do it.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, that's another
Yes.
point. Yeah.
Then I'll be diagnosed pathology.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You've got anger issues, you see.
Exactly. Yeah. At some point, I was told that you're a passive aggressive, and I'm thinking, what have I actually done?
Yeah. For advocating or standing up for yourself, or
Yeah.
being able to say, you know what, this makes me uncomfortable.
Yes. So it's like I'm supposed to be quiet and then just
Stick it in.
stomach it.
Yeah.
And just go.
It's an interesting statement. That's how she is, or that's how he is. You're putting the onus on the person experiencing behavior that they're finding uncomfortable or unsafe.
Yeah.
You're putting all the onus on them to
Manage it.
manage, to tolerate
Tolerate it. That's a good word.
to you know, sort of like, you have to figure that out, because and you're automatically systemically protecting this person. You know, because when you said that, I felt like saying, but you know, I put myself in your situation, but this is how I am. I am uncomfortable with that pitch.
Well, but see, then
So
you're
that's how
labeled.
she is, and this is how I am. So now we're two people who matter, who have value. What are you gonna do now? Because that's how I am, and that's how she is.
Yeah.
But now we need to do something.
Doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
You are labeled as sensitive.
Yeah.
Oh.
She can't
That's
work
right.
it
I'm
out.
sensitive,
sensitive.
100%.
And that's a problem. You need to
Yeah.
build a thicker skin.
I'm trying to I can be challenging.
Yeah.
Anyone who knows, it's like 100%. I'm sensitive. I'm really sensitive. Like, so that's why I don't enjoy that bitch. So now what are we gonna do? Like, my sensitivity is as important as this person's need to be high pitched. So what are you gonna do? Because we have to be in the place together.
Yeah.
For most people, when they do try to do that, right, they are then labeled sensitive or incapable of managing the situation, and life in the workplace gets harder, and then they leave.
You might end up leaving 100%. And I think the way, I mean, I guess there's a power imbalance there, and I think, you know, sort of whether maybe not advice everybody wants to take, but I like to sort of try to challenge those power imbalances in certain ways. Like, you need to see me too, and there's an opportunity that you're giving the person to equalize the balance of power in that moment. And they choose whether they take it or not. If they don't, I think regardless of what you do, if they're not going to equalize the balance of power, you're the one who's going to leave that job eventually. But there's an opportunity like that you've just offered to say, okay, I am sensitive. Like, if that, like, I don't agree with that kind of, I know that's a silencing. It's like, okay, you're going to silence me, you know, like, so, but I'm not going to be silenced. Okay, so I'm sensitive. What are you going to do? Yeah, I don't know. It's just
and one thing, if I may say this, Hala, one thing with people like of color like me, you know, we are all migrants, you and me. But do you know that when you say that, someone like me might not even be able to say anything like that?
That's another one.
Yeah,
because they don't have the guts.
Yeah, everybody's different.
Yeah.
Some people, don't have
agency.
Yeah, and some will think, oh my goodness, they start thinking of all the troubles that they will have when they lose the job.
Yeah,
and then they just say, okay, I'm gonna brave it. I'm gonna brave it until.
I've been bullied in a lot of workplaces. I've left a lot of work. I've been the one that left. It always backfired. It's not like I get away with it. Like, my name is Hala Abdenoor. It's very Muslim sounding. I'm often the token Muslim. I'm not actually Muslim. Not that, like, I'd be proud if I was, but I'm not. And it's sort of like a funny joke. It's an irony because I get hired because it's like a diversity hire, you know? And then I say, can I take Good Friday off? Because our Good Friday is different. Like, what do you mean you want Good Friday off? Aren't you Muslim? I'm like, no. You know, I just casual. No, I'm not. Like, oops. You know, did I ruin something? Yeah, so I have a bit of fun with it. And I'm joking around now, but I actually, part of the reason I run my own business is I just didn't want to deal with that anymore in a workplace. And that isn't an easy decision to take, and it's not a decision everyone can take. But I've reached a point of satirical humor after 20 years of experiencing various types of racial bullying in workplaces and witnessing it and observing it. And I have no doubt that whatever I experience is multiplied for you. Well, I've no doubt, I know that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's quite very interesting. And once we spoke about the community initiatives in terms of getting the community together, do we have, like, if I can give all of you ladies, maybe if you can pick maybe 2 community-based activities that you could see that they were working, and maybe you were asked to look at maybe one that did not work. I think that could help us because that's more practical, that's more community-based, that's what even our audience will be like, okay, I can resonate to that. I've seen that. Because we're all from, diverse backgrounds, diverse where we're coming from, Do you want to start out? No?
I have a lot.
All right, bring it on, shoot.
I mean, look, I'm going to be reflecting back in time a little because I did a lot of community development work in the 2000s, over a 10-year period. And I still talk to a lot of the young people that were engaged in those programs, all mostly newly arrived from all types of backgrounds, all types of trauma. Not everyone came from a war zone, but quite a lot did. Refugee camps, the whole shebang. And, everything that we've been describing, we're talking about an adult migrating, but young people too, I think are often missed by their own communities. I even think back on my life and think, I don't think my parents understood just how traumatic migrating was at the age of 9. Kids are cruel in primary school at that age. They're so cruel. Like, adults still, anyway. So I did a bit of work in the 2000s. A lot of it was youth work, and I still talk to a lot of these young people, and so it's kind of their reflections back to me on, and they're very, they've just, some of them like just doing amazing, they're all amazing.
Okay, beautiful, I love it.
But they're doing amazing things in their lives, like just in politics and in social systems, public health, and all types of services. What worked was creating community, was creating a space for them to come to be themselves, to be able to have a voice. So whether it's through leadership programs, camps, art exhibitions, soccer programs that we ran, so so many other things, actually, like teaching them how to organize, how to get money from the government and organize their own events. So every year we held a one-day summit, and often the topic had to do with racism, and they chose a topic every year and they ran the event themselves. Media engagement and public speaking. So these things were instrumental for them to carve their space as Australians, and to enter into this society and to contribute to it positively, because people need to make positive contributions around them. And when you block their access to employment and you block their access to good education, if you block their access to finance, then they're going to start engaging in antisocial behavior. But if you open doors, like, everybody wants to feel useful in their environment, and then they connect with other people in the same boat. So I think that was quite powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Tutarune?
Well, I would say some things that, have worked were offering African women driving lessons. And as mentioned before, that really just completely opened up a whole range of opportunities for employment, for managing their life, and also for exiting DV situations. because that mobility, at least if you got a car, you can throw the kids in there, you can throw some stuff in there, and then you can go to services like Halas or others where you can actually get some support. But if you are taking the bus, you can't go anywhere in the middle of the night, as it were. So that has been really instrumental. Also, teaching African communities mental health first aid, how to notice it in our communities with our young people, noticing how to identify when someone's not feeling too great, because not everyone's going to say, I'm not feeling well, right? Most people, how are you? Great, even though, they have been self-harming the night before, right? So it's about, okay, when really engaging with people in a way that helps them to feel empowered to ask the right questions, because that's part of it. People are scared because they themselves are like, well, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do. And so that's been really useful as well within many different communities, offering that mental health first aid for free so that they can actually learn those skills. And of course then, sitting with women and actually practicing an interview. Actually reviewing the CV and be like, okay, let's try that again. Let's, okay, maybe try to say this instead of that, and actually giving them the practice for free to then be able to move forward. And of course, Dress for Success, which is an organization that we, African Women Australia, often works with, where women can go and get an outfit for interview. And so then what we also did was we will provide childcare. If you have an interview, we will provide childcare.
Oh, wow.
So that you can go to that interview without dragging 100 things, trying to manage your children, and you can actually succeed at the interview. So we make sure you have a driver's license, we train you for the interview, we get you all dolled up, and we take care of your kids.
It's amazing.
That's amazing. That's great work, eh? Beautiful. Adi?
What I would say, maybe I'm started working with my community, like Zimbabwean community, and to start from the grassroots, to say people come together. Let's come and just be together. So to start building real relationships, so that when it comes, if I'm connected to Tinashe, I know her. The day that I have a problem, I might not be able to call the 1300 respect, but I can call Tinashe because she's connected to me. I can talk to him, because some people are not, they don't know who's going to answer. And coming from our backgrounds, people go back and forth. Like if they are going through domestic violence, to them it's like, should I not? Should I not? But if I have a confidante and
So
say,
important, yeah.
please, I'm going through this, what should I do? Then from there I can get help. And I've seen that to be starting to work. But one thing that I know is not working is just to keep to ourselves.
Right.
To keep to ourselves and doing things this old Zimbabwean way, because we are Zimbabweans, and not integrate or learn from the next culture. Hala, how do you do things in your community? This is working. Why don't we also take it up? So it's like sharing ideas and sharing life. Then we can learn from each other. By that way, little by little, Australia is going to be a bit of a different space to live. And also some of the deep-seated beliefs and values that we've always had. To say, okay, what should we be doing? I come from a culture where, I mean, it's drama, but I come from a culture where you can't sit in the same space with your son-in-law and talk. And those things, do we really want to keep it at that when I've got a very small family, 4 people? And then I'm saying, the only person that is coming, I can't talk to you because that's my background. So it's
Meanwhile,
opening
that
up.
son-in-law knows that you're a mental health practitioner and wants to come to you and say,
I've got
I'm
a
not
problem.
okay, but he can't.
He can't. Because where we come from, keep your distance. So it's coming to learn from those things and say what works and what doesn't. What can we change so that life becomes better for us here?
That's amazing. Because when you look at the culture where you're coming from, the things that we've been doing before. Now we're coming here, we are the first generations, but then what about the second generation, right? But anyway, before we get to that, Karen?
I think from my perspective, it was interesting because I was feeling very isolated here, and I've been feeling that way for a long time. And then I met Lucky Ngoshi from Mosa.
Right.
And I actually initiated a rally in Sydney Hyde Park around Zimbabwean politics.
Right. Okay. Are you politics?
Are you from Zimbabwe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we had a rally to kind of raise awareness of what was happening in Zimbabwe when they had the election at that time. And so I met a few people, and then I found out there was this community on Facebook, and said, "Can I join?" I said, "Yes, of course you can join." I was like, oh my God, it's so exciting. And from that, it was like I felt so embraced by the community. I felt so accepted. It was such an honor and so humbling for me, given some of my heritage as a white person living
From
in Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe.
But then I was able to start just contributing in the discussions, or just giving my point of view, or comfort or whatever, and just connecting little by little. And then I started getting people contacting me, and I would just sit and talk with them on the phone. I wasn't really having a counselling, so just give me a call, catch up with you. And so that's kind of emerged from there. So I was thinking, like, if you're kind of on the other side, is reach out, but in a spirit of take that step to connect, to find out, but in a spirit of humility and really being genuinely interested, not in a paternalistic, I can do for you. It's like, oh, what can we do? So what we can do. And so some of the ideas that I've been having is trying to help develop more suicide assist training. So I'm assist trained, assist trained, to see if we can facilitate that in that community and get more people trained. Anyone can do that. Thinking about using creativity like art therapy for people to share their stories about their migration experiences through art making. So I'd be happy to run a group for your.
That'd be great. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah. So I think things like that. And then we've got our Camden, just our local group that we're looking at, just having talks and events and things that we do together. So just creating that broader kind of community. But start somewhere.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we do have things like funerals as well. People die in our community. We come from the same background. And it's like when someone dies, we feel for the person. Even if you don't know them, our culture says, reach out, be together. So we even gather in places where we've never stepped our foot because a family member has died for that family. So that's another thing that brings us together as well as cultures. So it's like once you do that, and so there has been also a disconnect because our children, as usual, would leave them, and it's the adults only that are going. And they don't understand why do I have to go there? But then for us to continue with the identity, we have to include them in a way that feels best for them, and create that safe hub, such that, because like Hala said, when a family is bereaved or when there is loss, the children are most ignored. Everyone comes and says, "Oh, I'm so sorry" to the big people. But what's happening to these ones? They're also part of the loss, but who is attending to them? But if they can connect in their own space, then it can be richer.
Yeah. It's quite emotional and very sensitive sometimes when we talk about loss, Do you want to maybe break it down for the audience, obviously? Say, for example, we are here, we're the first generation, or people are the first generations in migration, right? When they lose their loved ones who are back home, when they are here, how best do you support someone in that space, Dr. Dune?
So supporting the person here
Yes.
who has lost someone back home.
Yes.
Well, I think as people have mentioned, it's being there. Really, because grief is a communal experience, and if you have to grieve by yourself, it will kill you.
Grief deserves a witness.
Yes.
That's what David Kessler says that.
Yes.
Okay.
And my experience right now, I mean, I'm happy to share that, just having lost my mother on Monday.
Sorry about
Is
that.
it, I might tear up, that's okay. Is just being so, just having all these messages from all these women and all these people just, I can't pronounce it how they, what you that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
And then even from people doing trauma. It was like, that was just so comforting to me because I'm here, I'm all alone, I'm separated from my sisters, we can't grieve together. My husband didn't know my mother very well, and well, he didn't ever meet her because he's the second one. So, and then because I'd immigrated, my adult children really didn't know their grandmother either. So I don't have anything. And then I just have this amazing community that has just embraced me just so naturally. And I just, that's amazing. I love it. But it's been a huge source of comfort for me. So I can see exactly why that's so important.
Beautiful. How do we then include the children in this whole space? Like when we're going out there to for the funerals and everything else, how do we then make sure that our kids understand the before we get to that, how do you in your couch, how do you do that?
Well, it was an interesting question when you asked it. I had a bit of a reaction because I've only lost people overseas. Like the majority of my family is still in Lebanon.
Yeah.
And in other parts of the world, we're like a very small group here. And so I'm so used to, my whole life I've lost people who don't live next to me, which is a blessing in the sense that my closest family I haven't lost them yet. But
Okay.
But I lost my grandmother in Lebanon, and I was very close to her. I lived with her for 4.5 years, during the war. So she's had a massive impact on my life, and other family members, aunties, and people who are close to me. And it's such a difficult process because you don't really know they're gone till you go back and don't see them there. Like you really need to go and physically see. So like I know intellectually they're gone, but I don't know that they're gone because I'm not next to them anyway. So I have this delusion they're still there, and it's extremely like I prepare myself psychologically every time I go back for whatever loss has happened since I last went there. So that's a big process. But here in Australia, we do the church service that they would do there. Like, so you tell the priest and then you would do like not the full funeral or anything, but you pray and you mention their name and you mention the whole family and we do that. And then the community, I guess, in the church, but also like people who are family friends would then, we do a lot of visitations, like come over and, like, so you get that from the community. And I think, I think I've just grown up with that. It's always been like having been a kid, and even as an adult, like it's just what my parents organize all of it, or my aunties here. So I kind of like a tag along to it all. And now that I'm at this age and they're older, I just think I don't think any of that's going to continue when they go. Like I'm not really like they never taught me. I think when you live in your own country, you just see it all the time, so you naturally learn some things. Like these are things that adults have to actively teach kids, and if they don't, like if you're just a tag along at the church services or whatever memorial it is or whatever's going on, you actually don't learn the process of creating it. So when the older generation goes, you don't even know how to do it. So you just don't do it. Like you probably adopt something that you've learned from others around you. And we are exposed to a lot of diversity in Australia, so I don't know, I'll probably like go and say a prayer by a tree at this rate. Not that this is what First Nations do, but I spent a lot of time trying to learn more about First Nations Australians and
right.
their processes, and then I hear, people from other communities talk, and there's so much we have in common, and there's also so much depth and beauty in Aboriginal Australian cultures that we really don't tap into, that are so beautiful when it comes to healing and it comes to gathering together. And like, I wish we lived in a country where you could go to an elder and ask for a healing ceremony, heal from the grief of having left your homeland, actually do proper welcome to country ceremonies rather than citizenship ceremonies. I mean, we know what yesterday was, 26th of Jan. A lot of people got their citizenship yesterday by a white person.
Yeah.
Who isn't even honouring the invasion, isn't even honouring the genocide that happened here, let alone asking the elders to welcome us on this land now that we're here. You know, and so I think there's a lot we can do that's much deeper than that. And when any of us, like so many of us who come from countries with a lot of ritual and a lot of depth of culture and things like that, we hear about First Nations processes and we relate. We're like, oh wow, that makes sense to me. Like, I can work with that. You know, I don't know how to work with the isolated individualistic model. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. All right. So in your country, right? Say you mentioned that your grandma passed away. When you go back to Lebanon, is there a process that you do?
Like, I missed everything because
Okay.
by the time it took me a year and a half after she passed away to go back.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
And by the time I went back, we couldn't even access the house she was in anymore, which is the house I grew up in. So that was really sad for me. And it's actually like sad now, and it'll always be sad because that's my part of Beirut, and I can't like go back there because that was a rental and we didn't get to keep it.
Oh yeah.
So I wasn't part of the process of distributing her stuff and all of those things. But I mean, it's largely, we're actually we're not colonized Christians, we're Christian, like Jesus was born there. So we have not, like, that is our cultural ritual.
Yeah.
It is within the Eastern Church, is like the service, the funeral, lots of houses. Again, like, it's who visits, and off screen we were talking about the structure of the family and who sits. So like there's a system about who has to go visit who based on respect relationships.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, like, so all of that would have taken at least a month over there because there's so many people, and I just missed all of it. So and I've missed it for everyone who's died. So I can't even fully tell you what it would be like.
Yeah. All right, no, fair enough.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain to us, say for example, someone passes back home, maybe 2-3 relatives, maybe in the last 1 year, then you go back to Zimbabwe. What's the process in there?
The process is actually per individual, but usually, because you were not there when this happened, the people that you were crying with or that you were in the process with, mourning with, grieving with, they are still there. There are some people. So although, you know, with COVID, a lot of things happened as well because many people also died in groups. So sometimes, like, I went home recently and my sister died maybe a few years ago during COVID. I couldn't go. And then I missed her unveiling of the tombstone and everything. But when I went there, I couldn't, because I was like, Hala, she's dead, because definitely I can't talk to her, can't call her. But let me go and see where she was laid. So that's usually what we do. I'll go and see and maybe take flowers to the graveside and just put there and maybe pray, sing. I'm a singer. So we'll sing and pray right there and go with family that we can go and maybe see some people that we're close, my sisters, my brothers. We talk a little bit, about our lost sibling. And so usually those are the things that happen. Yeah. So in coming to talking about, I think she's in the spot where I'm the first generation, she must be second.
I'm
or in the middle.
Yeah.
It's like trying to think, how does it feel for her? How does she feel connected? But as for my kids, I would encourage. I know sometimes they say, oh, mom is doing too much. Oh, mom, that's doing it. But sometimes when we cook, when we have these gatherings, I make them be part of it. Can you please cook this stew and take it down? So the last time I think I sent my youngest daughter, she was saying, and she can't even speak my language very well. So she said, when I get there, people will be talking to me in our language, but some of the things I don't understand them. So I'll just be saying, I said, just go and do what you can do. But after that, she really connected. She said, oh, is that what happens? And then when we go there as well as a group, they see me singing because I'm very active in those places. So they see what their mom is doing, and I hope they can also learn in action.
In action.
Yeah, so that they can perpetuate the whole process, because very soon it's going to be them as families losing whatever they're losing. Now they'll be losing people here.
Yes.
It's not going to be us crying for people at home, but it's going to be them comforting each other here when things happen. So hopefully these skills can be transferred.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would definitely agree with that. I guess like from the experience of what's called a 1.5 generation migrant, because we came as children to wherever we went to, it is very, I guess, isolating to not know what your parents are doing for people back home. When my grandmother died, and so that's my mother's mother, and we went to Zimbabwe and I saw it. And it was, and it's so vivid. I remember it now, and I would have been like 6, 7. It's so vivid in my mind. And I think one of the key things is that so many people told me stories, and I actually was able to then connect. And I find that what happens for kids now, to answer your previous question, they don't, even if they don't know who that person is, the advice would be tell them the story. Tell them who that person is. Because it's not just you telling them for your own relief and grief and mourning. You're telling them so that the child knows who they are. Because what ends up happening is that distance occurs and the language gets lost. And, we're so encouraged to speak English, and then, Shona just like falters. And then we feel embarrassed going to go and speak to people in our groups because we don't speak it perfectly. And then we feel shy, and then we stay further back, and then we're not included. And then at the end of the day, when I'm sitting with somebody who is a second, even third generation migrant, and they have issues with self-worth and value and identity, it comes down to they don't know who they are. They don't know their language. They don't know any stories. And this is the issue that plagues the well-being of Indigenous people. They don't know where they came from. They don't know who their grandparent is. They don't know their language. They don't know their country. And then we're surprised when their mental health has deteriorated. And so you asked the previous question about what happens 10 years down the track. We only have to look at the suffering that Indigenous people go through to understand what's going to happen.
Yeah. Wow.
That's a tough one.
But it's the truth. So give your kids language. Include them in things. Even if they don't want to go, send them to go and bring the tray of food. Tell them the stories of the people that were there. Because without that, what is there? What will I have to give my son who is 9 months old? Nothing. I can't give him my language because I don't speak it well enough to teach him. So then so when he grows up and he asks the question, who am I? He's Australian.
That's a deep one. That one is a deep one.
I think it's a great point, and there was a TED talk that came up on my feed the other day, and there was a guy was saying it's not far away that the whole world's gonna just speak English. I think there's an intention of that as well, at some level in the system, and it's hard to challenge when everything gets created,
Systemized as well.
Yeah, systemized to force you to do that. Like I very recently, weirdly, just had 2 conversations with 2 different people. One came from Jordan, one from Syria, and we're talking about language, and they were talking about really wanting to speak language. So which language? And I said Arabic. And I said no, English. And they were talking about teaching their kids, and I said, why not Arabic? Like, it's such an ancient, deep language. And they said, well, what do I need Arabic for? If I speak Arabic, do I get a job? Do I get this? Do I get that? Like, if I speak English, I can get everything. So why would I learn Arabic?
Except identity.
Exactly. But that's because they haven't lost that's because they're very connected to their identity, and they don't know what it's like
Yeah.
You know, and
To lose it.
in so many ways, the adults that migrate don't spend enough time understanding what it's like for their kids on that level. On a superficial level, 100%, they can all tell you they're sad about this, they like this friend, they did this at school, they didn't do this at school. But at a deep level, what it's like to be the child of a migrant, you know, or a child migrant yourself, it's difficult. And you know, there's another layer too. Like when we came, my mother and two of my aunties are teachers of language and literature, so Arabic and my mom I think taught English as well in Lebanon. But so my sister and I came here, and we went, like, I finished grade 3 in Lebanon, then I came here, and so I could already read and write. And for 2 years, every day after English school, like after normal school here, we had to sit and do like dictation and read and write. And I was literally getting beaten up at school for being an Arab. Like every day I was being hit with tree branches, and my hair was getting pulled, and I was getting kicked and punched and called names I didn't understand because I couldn't speak English. I was like being absolutely violated for being an Arab. So I didn't want to keep learning Arabic. As a kid, it wasn't a safe language.
No.
You know, and that was, I think, really hard and for the whole family to manage. But I eventually, like, I wanted to straighten my hair, dye it blonde, and call myself Rachel and never speak a word of Arabic. You know, and get, like, I'm very Aussie. I can actually sound like a bogan. Like, I can sound like any kind of Australian you want. And it's that's a, you know, I mean, you talked about 1.5, this third culture kid is the other one. We just can speak any language.
Yeah.
It's a safety thing.
You know,
Oh.
like switch.
Oh
Yes.
yeah, because I've been in situations where if I'm not Aussie enough, I'm gonna start copying it. So I would just be like, I'm safe. I can talk about the footy for hours. I do not like AFL. I cannot stand that game. I'm sorry. Like if this is offensive to anyone watching this, I really don't like AFL. I love sports. But I can talk about the AFL for hours. And you would not know how little I like it. It's you develop these things. So anyway, I stopped learning how to read and write Arabic. I can still read and write, but like a 9-year-old. So yeah, I think there's also the balance, because I worked with a lot of adults too in the migrant refugee sector, and they were like, our kids must know, our kids must learn, our kids must continue our ways. And I'm like, yeah, but is it safe for them? And it's like, is there a time? Like, can you give your children a time, and can you work with them? And each child's going to be different to like find their way around the dual identity, because that's what it is at the end of the day. They're growing up with a different identity to you.
I think what really creates the concern between parents and children is the lack of acknowledgement. And, you know, in defense of parents, right, who migrate, there's, you know, something called like the Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? And at the bottom is like survival, and at the top is self-actualization. And so the whole idea of people migrating is to move past survival so that their kids can self-actualize, which is that bit at the top. But in that space, right, parents are working well and truly 60 hours a week. They don't have the time, the bandwidth, and they have their own trauma that they're carrying from the home country and the trauma that they're experiencing in the workplace. And, you know, when I was growing up, my dad, pharmacist, I walked into the pharmacy, and this man, I just saw him throwing his packet of pills back at my dad, and it hit his chest, and the man said, "I'm not taking my medication from an N-word." And I'm standing there as a child watching this happen to my father, between this man and my father. And my father picks up the medication. He says, "Sir, your medication." And I was like, shit. So that's what my dad's going through. When does he have time to teach me language? When does he have time to really understand my cross-cultural experience? So in his defense, in my parents' defense. But I think what is missing is the parent even acknowledging that the child is trying to stand on two shaky platforms, not just one, as they're growing up. Because they're the home culture and the culture in the country that they've migrated to. And there are times when I feel like I wish my parents had said, "I know it's hard for you." That would have been enough.
Yeah, to add to that, I think that then also what we know about brain development and neuroscience now is that children will feel our emotions So they will internalize our felt emotions.
Mm.
So if we, as the first generation migrants, are struggling to do that, and we're sitting with all our own trauma, anxiety, all sorts of things, numbness, our children are going to just pick that up and think they don't know how to make sense of that. Now we know that that happens. So it's then, I think, having those conversations and being open about what that experience is, and finding a way to appropriately share grief and all that goes with migration, and the good things too, but as a family, so that there is an emotional language that children understand, and they can see that it's not what's separate, what's yours, what's mine as a parent, and what's theirs. Because I think that's really important.
My dad, he actually, then the man walked away, and my dad turned and looked at me, and we made eye contact, and then he was like, "Hi, darling," and I was just like, "Oh, so that's how you do it." I see. And for a lot of migrants, we have a lot of anxiety, depression, trauma, grief underneath the surface of it's fine. Somebody gets upset with you, or you in the workplace, like that example before of like, oh, this is just how the manager is, and you're like, okay.
I think too, we do have all of those things. I always like to throw in the mix as well. We also have a lot of resilience. We have like an immense amount of resilience because of all the things we live through. Like, and I think it's, for me, like working with people who've experienced any kind of adversity is really important to connect them with, like somewhere deep in you where the shame and the trauma lies your resilience as well. And, sort of working with the two together, like tapping into whatever resilience you've got to work with the other stuff, the loss and the grief and the trauma, not to be missed. I always was really aware of that as a child growing up here and listening to what the Anglo-Australian kids were saying to me. And I grew up in a very white area, and I thought, I know so much already, like at 10, 12, 15, I thought, I know so much more than you because of what I've lived through. Like, you say all these things, and I feel like there's this wealth, there's a well in me that you don't have because you didn't live through what I lived through. So yes, it was harder, but I love what I have because of it. And I kind of did this in myself. That's why I try to bring it out in other people, is always try to stay connected with that. Like, there's something special about my experience that these people don't have. Like, yes, they have a better house than me, and I'm too embarrassed to invite them to my house. And yes, they have, like, I don't know, gymnastics and soccer and rock climbing, all 20 million things they do after school that I can't do, right? But I go to the pools and learn from them. Like, they pay for the swimming lessons, and like one question per person, how do you do that stroke? And but they don't have what I have. And that's, this society doesn't value that because it doesn't know it in the dominant culture, but we know it in our communities. So we can bring that out in each other, to connect with it.
Wow. This is a tough one. It's always a tough one. But you know what? Ladies, this has been great. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your contributions. Appreciate your worth of experience that you brought to the table. It's amazing. And I'll go back to the viewers. Viewers, you know what? Thank you very much. It's always here where we've got a lot of things that are shared with you. Admire that of business. Your host is here. Admire, as always. Thank you.